Then.
All right, well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for our very first brown bag in our research brown bag series for SSGS, the very first one for this academic year. We are very excited to hear as our first presenter from Dr. Kate Green. She is a professor in political science, but also is an archaeologist. So she recently completed her Master of Letters degree in Archaeological Studies at the University of the Highlands and Islands in Scotland. And so what she'll be sharing with us today is her work at the Ness of Brodgar site located at the heart of Neolithic Orkney World Heritage Site in Scotland that she went to this summer and has been to previously. And so she'll share her work out there with us. So take it away, Kate.
All right, thank you. Why is it not working now?
Oh no.
Okay. Yes, I entitled this presentation Hard Work and Paperwork, Excavations at the Ness of Brodgar, Orkney, Scotland, because one of the things I've learned about excavations is not only is digging and even working in the Finds Hut hard work, there's a lot of paperwork that has to be done. More than I think sometimes they need, but they know what they're doing. So this is the Ness of Brodgar, but I want to tell you about Orkney first, because you can't really understand the Ness unless you know a little bit about Orkney. Orkney is a group of islands located off the northeastern tip of Scotland. It is about 50 miles to the south of the Shetland Islands. It is almost parallel with Bergen, Norway. That's how far north it is. Here's the main islands. There are lots of other little smaller ones. And our focus is going to be on this area on the island that they call mainland. The heart of Neolithic Orkney, the UNESCO World Heritage Site. So these are some of the sites that are part of that. And the Ness is located right where my little arrow is. And some of these places I'm going to talk about, some of them I'm not. There's really just too much. Orkney is an archaeologist's dream. They have archaeology starting around the Mesolithic, going all the way up to World War II. But my area of interest has always been the Neolithic. And so I'm just going to briefly give you a bit about the Neolithic monuments of Orkney. And there's stalled and chambered cairns, settlements, stone circles, some of the original stone circles, actually, much older than Stonehenge. And of course, the Ness of Brodgar, which is unique. So just to give you an idea of how much archaeology there is, this is just some of the archaeology, the Neolithic archaeology in Orkney. So let's start with the stalled chambered cairns. This is one that's called Midhow. It's on the island of Rousey. It's what they call an Orkney Cromarty type because there are similar ones in Caithness, North Scotland. And these are long stalled cairns with orthostatic divisions. And an orthostat is this thing, these long, flat piers kind of that extend into, and this one is huge. As you can see, they built a hangar over it, and you can actually walk on this walkway up above. And so you know, in most of these photographs are mine. When I steal them, I let you know. So Midhow, circa 3300 BCE. We're going to see this is also around the same time as they start to find evidence of building at the Ness. Another type of cairn that they have is a chambered cairn, which if they have a long enough passage are also known as passage graves. This one's known as Cueen, dates around 3000 BCE, also known as the dog tomb because they found bones of dogs, even a skull. They've in fact done a reconstruction of what the dog might have looked like. The difference between these and the others, there's no orthostats. As you can see, there's a long passage, low, you have to crawl through. My brother-in-law didn't think he was going to make it, but we made him go in anyway. And off to the side are chambers. And what you can't see in this photograph, but you'll see in a later photograph, are the ceilings are corbelled, which means as the walls go up, they start moving the stones in until they essentially are enough to where they can use a large capstone over them. This was the first place we went, actually, or the second place we went. When I first went to Orkney, the Tomb of the Eagles, also known as Isbister. I have a real fondness for this because it was discovered by a farmer in 1958, the year that I was born. He couldn't get the archaeologists to help him excavate it or to excavate it, so he just started going around to their other digs and watched what they were doing, and then decided in 1976, the year I graduated from high school, that he was going to excavate it. And he did. They did send an archaeologist out to help him, but they were just amazed at what a great job he was doing. This is one of those unique tombs in that, one, you get to ride a little cart to get into it, but it is a combination of a stalled tomb like Midhow. You can kind of, in this picture down here, see the orthostats. You can kind of, I didn't have a very good picture, see the other orthostats that divided into spaces, but also off to the side there are chambers. You can kind of see one of these back here. But anyway, I'm trying to get through this stuff. I just want you to see the architecture. This is the Unston Cairn. It's a passage grave. It's also, like Isbister, has the both the orthostatic divisions and little side chambers, and it dates to around 3000. The big one, the one that most people know about, is a tomb called Maeshowe. It's actually one of the newest, 2700 BCE. As you can see, it's very large. Originally, they believed it was a ditch and a bank around it, and then they excavated and discovered that it actually had a wall around it. And it's a long passage grave. This is the interior. I stole this one, obviously. I've got some other pictures that are mine. You can see the very long passage that comes in. It is aligned on the midwinter solstice, sunset, whereas the other really large passage grave in Ireland, Newgrange, is aligned on the sunrise. So in that way, it's different. So what basically happens is, as the sun sets, if the sun is shining, around the solstice, the light will shine through the passage and light up the back chamber. So here are some of my pictures. This shows you the corbelled roof. Obviously, part of that is modern. This tomb was actually broken into by Vikings, and one of the interesting things you can find in it are Viking runes and drawings. There's the Maeshowe dragon, which is really cool. But you can see here the passage is very long. It's I think around 10 meters long, and these stones are huge. You got to be careful not to bump your head. And it is a chamber tomb. It has the side chambers, as you can see in that picture. Now, Neolithic settlements. This is the oldest, dating 3600 to 3300 BCE. It's called the Nap of Howar. It's on one of the smaller northern islands known as Papa Westry, or they just call it Pappy. It's two buildings right next to each other. You can see that from the middle picture. One is larger than the other, and the theory is that one was the domestic area where they lived, and the other was a workshop. You can see it is divided up by orthostats, and this little area right here is literally a little walkway, or actually a crawl space, between the two. This is considered one of the oldest farmsteads in northwestern Europe. Another interesting thing that you'll understand why I show you this later is a place called Smirkhoy. I like to call it Smirky. It's a small settlement where they've excavated these houses. And the interesting thing about this and others in the area is that they're normal size houses, and then there's always one larger house. The Orcadians were apparently also into art, And so you can see on the right here is a stone with what they call a, I can't remember what they call it now. That's how my brain works. It's a, it looks like eyebrows kind of, and you're going to see this motif again in other places. One of the interesting things about Orkney is that there aren't a lot of trees today. And so the idea was that, the belief was that, well, the reason we're finding all of these stone-built places is because there weren't any trees to build with. But at Wideford Hill, when they were excavating a couple of houses there, they discovered post holes, which clearly related to a wooden structure that was there before the stone. And again, these are dated around the same time as the Ness. One of the interesting things about Orcadians is that they liked to, when a building was worn out, they would just basically knock it down and build something else right on top of it. And a lot of times what they do is simply kind of realign it a little bit, realign the hearth, realign the entrance, and just rebuild. So there's, many layers. And this one, they went down far enough that they found the post holes. So we know that they were actually and there's more and more evidence appearing that Orkney once had trees. And that they were big trees and they were using them. Now, the most famous settlement on Orkney is what actually drew me to Orkney, which is Skara Brae. As you can see, this is a wonderful, this is actually an old picture of this building. They thought they would, they put a glass roof on it so you could look in it, and then it basically started destroying everything inside because it got too hot. So that's now covered in grass. But as you can see, these buildings here, incredibly well preserved. They're right along the beach, but back in 3000, between 3000 and 2450 BCE, I forgot the E on there, these buildings would have actually been about 1 kilometer away from the beach. And they were discovered in the 1850s when a storm uncovered them. And this section over here are the early houses. These are the later houses, and these houses were literally in the ground. And if you can see these little walkways, and I'm going to show you a picture of those in a second. So the belief is that they didn't have to go outside, right? That they just could get to each other's houses through these covered walkways. The other interesting things, and this is looking through one of those walkways. If you pay extra money, you actually get to go into the, otherwise you don't. So this is one of the typical houses at Skara Brae. And you'll notice that the early archaeologists, the antiquarians actually, they decided that they're going to call them dressers, right? We don't know what they're for. But these are amazingly preserved. And the window, by the way, is an archaeologist, when they were doing some rebuilding, his daughter was like, well, they should have a window. And so he put a window in. That wasn't real. But you'll notice they have these little areas over here. They called these beds. We don't know if they were beds. But I mean, this is just amazing what is left. This is a quern where they would have, ground their meals. These wonderful little boxes are literally watertight, so they could put water in them. We don't know what they used them for, but they could do that. Here's a view looking through the entranceway. And one of the very interesting things about Skara Brae is that not just the furniture, but the fact that this is the first evidence they found for a door that would lock. They could lock it from the inside. But then that other building, the one that had the glass over it for a while, that one locked from the outside. So I kind of wonder what was going on in there. So another settlement that's really interesting is known as Barnhouse. And what you don't see, this is just what they rebuilt after the excavation. to the right here would have been a whole series of houses. And then we have these unique structures, structures 2 and structure 8. I'll show you bigger pictures of them in a second. And the really interesting thing is that these here and the houses where they lived had totally separate drainage systems. The Orcadians were really good at drains, by the way. And because it rains a lot there. And they had different tempered pottery. So that the pottery that was found over in the domestic area was tempered differently than the pottery that was found in the larger structures. This is one of the houses. You can see it resembles a Scarborough house. You kind of have a little bed over here. This would have been where the furniture was, this is structure 2. This is one that used orthostats. And they think this is a ritual house because you are guided through it in particular directions. Very different from other houses. And then here's a monumental house called structure 8. Not only does it have huge walls, had furniture in it, had a hearth in the entranceway, as you can see there, but it had a courtyard and then another wall around it. Okay. Close to that is the original stone circle in Britain, the Stones of Stennis, dating 3100 to 2900 BCE. Again, I left off the E. So originally there would have been 12 stones. It's a henge. It had a ditch and a bank. You can barely see these because these fields have been plowed. In fact, back in the 1800s, the farmer who was leasing this land started blowing up the stones. And the locals were like, just because they love their archaeology, were like, wait a minute, dude, you can't do that, you know? But if you look here, this is Barnhouse, right? Right near the Stones of Stennis, and over in this direction is where Maeshowe is. And just for scale, this was Jen and my first trip to Orkney. So you can see I'm 5'5", she's 5'7". You can see how tall these stones are. They're pretty darn big. I used to be 5'6", but I'm not anymore. I may not even be 5'5" anymore. Anyway, so the Stones of Stennis is to the southeast of the Ness, and the Ring of Brodgar is to the north of the Ness, and it is the third largest stone circle. It has a ditch that is rock cut. They literally cut into the rock with antlers. That's all they had. But it has no bank, and that's what makes it different. Originally had 60 stones. They've discovered that the stones came from different quarries across Orkney, and what they believe is that this one was built by different communities in Orkney where they each came and did their own little section. So here's a nice picture. You'll notice this mound in the background. This area is also covered in Bronze Age barrows. And this is a nice view of the stones at the ring. Okay, now we get to what we're here to talk about, which is the Ness of Brodgar. So this is the isthmus. This is on to, this side is the Loch of Harry, and this side is the Loch of Stennis. This is a freshwater loch. This is a saltwater loch. Up here is the ring. To the south would be the Stones of Stennis. Okay. Now this is an early picture when you can make out the buildings better than you can now, because when you excavate, you're tearing things apart. So, and here's one. This one's pretty old too, because the water line that ran across the site is still in there. And I'm going to explain to you about these different structures. And this area here now has a trench in it, and the trench I'm in would be to the north. So how did they find the Ness of Brodgar? Well, they kind of cursed themselves for a while, because back in 1925, there was a guy who was plowing up the field, and he came upon this stone, and he noticed it had decorations on it. So he took it to one of his neighbors, who happened to be the grandfather of our tour guide. He said, "Oh, that's pretty cool looking." And they used a little chalk to kind of show you the decorations that was on it, took a picture of it, and told the archaeologists. And the archaeologists were like, "Oh, that's cool, let's put it in the museum," right? And that's about what they did. All right, well, many years later, they were doing geophysical survey of the UNESCO World Heritage Site, and they did the isthmus, and they saw this stuff. Yet they still weren't quite ready to start digging there, because it's like, well, what is that? Well, the woman who owned the house right there by this field decided she was going to plant it up, had a guy was plowing up the field, and he found a huge stone that had these weird notches in it. And they thought, okay, maybe it's a Bronze Age burial kist. So they call the archaeologists out. The archaeologists are like, well, okay, let's do a little digging, do some test pits. And like whammo, they're like, oh my God, there's just all this amazing stuff under here. And they started digging. And they started digging, I think, in 2003. Okay. This is what the site looks like today. This is the main trench here. We call that Trench P. This is Trench J, which I'm going to talk about, and this is Trench T. I'm going to give you a little history about this, but what this is, okay, is it's a huge complex. Like any grass there has something underneath it, right? The cars are parked over the wall, okay? There's archaeology everywhere. So we're just looking at a little teeny bit of it, and it's a complex. It's a complex of buildings. They weren't all there at the same time. They change over time how they're structured, just as the settlements did. And some of them, they just can't figure out. So let's get started. These are the trenches. Trench J is where I got to excavate. Trench P, Trench T. So I'm going to quickly go through these. The main structures in Trench P, this is what they look like. The thing you need to understand about this is that there's stuff underneath all of this, right? This, as they're getting down, they're like, oh no, there's another building under here. Oh no, there's another building under here. Oh, look, there's another one, right? Just keeps going. So this is kind of what it looks like today. Just to show you the quality of the workmanship here, you can see looking pretty nice. They did a good job. Sometimes we'll see. Just to give you an idea, structure one, because it's the first one they found, structure one originally ran this way, okay? And then you can see at some point they made it smaller and abandoned it. This is another structure over here. There's structures over here. They're just all over the place. This is structure 8. If you're here in the room with me, this is a model of structure 8 if you want to look at it. It's unique in that orthostats have now been replaced with these large piers. And this one had more hards in it than any other place, and some of the entrances had hards in them. And but the interesting thing I want you to look at here is this stuff that you see on the ground, right? Originally, when they came upon this, they thought, oh, okay, it's floor tiles. And then they realized that these tiles were much too thin to be floor tiles. If you stood on them, they'd just break. What they are roof tiles, that they literally had slate roofs on these buildings. And what happened with structure 8 is that part of the roof collapsed. They eventually just used the part of the building where the roof hadn't collapsed. And eventually you're going to see there was a whole nother building built over it.
Hey, with that many hards, is that a domestic structure? Or what are they doing?
Okay, see, that's the thing about these buildings is that we don't think they're domestic. Some of them might be, like structure 5 might be, but they're just enormous compared to the normal settlement sites. And there's not that much evidence of domestic stuff. There's evidence in some of them, like this is the one where they made all their pottery, right? Because we're finding all this pottery. But other than that, no, they're not sure. Some of the archaeologists say, oh yeah, it was just a big settlement. And the others are like, no, it's something different, So. All right, structure 12. This one's pretty cool. And this will help you see that when they built, and they did this with their houses too, they had double walls. Okay, so you see here's the outer part of the wall, here's the inner part of the wall, and then the inside is filled with midden. Midden is just refuse. And this building has been rebuilt and has more buildings underneath it. And the reason that we know we have more buildings underneath it is because the walls started slumping. And you can see that here, right here. And you can find evidence of this in others. And what the archaeologists there will tell you is that that the guys who built the original buildings were really good at it, but the later ones didn't do a very good job. You know, but you got to also remember that, you know, they weren't engineers, and you know, you build on top of something, it's probably gonna give you some problems later on. This is structure 10. It's the last of the buildings in this trench that it's huge. Okay, this is the outer wall. This is the inner wall. It also had structural problems, so they had to build buttresses inside of it, change its shape. Had this really cool courtyard. I got to be there when they lifted up this stone. They had the whole site. Everybody, come on over. We're going to lift up this stone. Right? Nothing underneath it. But it was fun. This area out here was a walkway that came all the way around. So the Orcadians, when they were done with the building, knock it down close to the foundation, fill it up with midden, and just cover it up. Okay. Well, here they apparently had a huge party beforehand because they found hundreds, like 600 or 700 cattle bone, all the same bone. Okay. So they think that everybody came with their, you know, piece of meat, and they had a big party, and then they just threw them out in the courtyard and then covered them up. Yeah. Yeah. 12:30. Okay. Oh, I got it. Keep moving. Okay. There's this cool wall around it. That's what it looks like. This is what they used to think it was. They thought it surrounded the thing. Okay. But what they've discovered is there was no wall on the side. Okay. Because they've excavated there and there wasn't anything. We just know there was a northern boundary wall and a southern boundary wall. All right, this is Trench J. This is my trench, and we're going to come back to it in more detail. This one I wanted to show you because it's just awesome. This is a building that is unlike any building they've found. It's got the coolest architecture. I don't have time to show it to you, but structure 27, it's in an area out of the primary trench. It was covered by a midden, and on top of it was Iron Age stuff. What's amazing about it is, and this is what it looks like, it's got these really long orthostats. You can see they've actually finally gotten down to the hearths, but this, okay, look at that stonework. And like structure 10, they're finding goat and sheep bones deposited on the outside. Okay. Other things they found, Orkney, there's two kinds of pottery in the Neolithic, the round bottom unstoneware and the larger flat bottomed grooved ware. Grooved ware originated in Orkney and is found as far south as Stonehenge. So it, you know, the idea is that the Orcadian ideas moved south, not that the Neolithic ideas moved north. Okay. They find lots of mace heads. They're almost always broken. The only anthropomorphic thing they've found is this thing they call the Brodgar boy. Looks like a little human. I love this Ness axe head. Ness or nice? Ness axe head, which was discovered by an American student, a professor from Willamette University brings students every summer, and she got to find that. And then they've also found this is the carved stone ball that they found. The last couple of times, even in Trench J, they've found uncarved stone balls. You know, they're the stone balls. These are found only, this is a replica. These are found only in Scotland. And there's a guy who's written a book about them all, and they have no idea what they're for. You know, so, okay. Working at the Ness. So my first 3 years of working at the Ness, I worked in the Finds Hut. And then last year I got permission to actually work in the excavation. So this is me in the Finds Hut, if you can see me. And I believe I have, so this was just one of the different huts that we had over the years. This was actually one of the smaller ones. So all these trays are filled with small finds or general finds that are being laid out to dry. I was actually given the task of organizing the general finds. The pot wasn't as big of a deal, but because there's so many general finds, bone, tooth, burnt bone, things like that. Um, and and you'll see in a second, because this is what I really want to talk about, is kind of how this works. But I hope I have time for this. This is an hour's worth of work in the finds hut down to, I think it's 30 or 45 seconds. I wish I could work that fast. Okay, so everybody who's out excavating gets a little, tray with small finds bags in them, okay? And each small finds bag has, Ness of Brodgar, 2018. If it's from a structure, then you put what the structure is, the date, the trench. This is the context. If you're an archaeologist, you guys know what that is. And then each bag already has filled in a small finds number. And then when you then indicate when you find something and put it in here, what it is, worked bone, and you put your initials on it, which is really important because if you screw something up, we know how to find you. And inside of that bag, there's a little plastic thing that also has the same finds number on it with a nail, and you'll see that in a minute. So in the finds hut, the first thing you do in the morning is all the finds that came in from the night before have to be put into the register. And that's a lot of the paperwork. And in the finds hut, if you're doing the register, 2 people have to do it because they have to double check each other. The one who's reading double checks the one who's writing, the one who's writing double checks the one who's reading. And everything is put in there. And over time, as things happen to the finds, as they dry out, as they get cleaned, as they get stored, we put more information into the register. We are now we were up to 44,000 something small finds this year. Okay. So this is what the pot looks like when you lay it out to dry. Your pot must, the number one rule is it always stays with its bag, right? So you lay it out, you let it dry. It's small finds bag that I just explained. Yeah, you see the bag here, which tells you where it was found, what the number is, what trench it came from, what structure it came from. Okay, these are the trays that have the general finds in them. But let's do the pot first. So here's some pot that's been dried and needs to be cleaned. So the first thing you do actually is you look at it and you see if you can tell if there's any kind of decoration on it. Is it a rim? Is it a bottom? Can you tell anything about it? If you can, you put that in the register. And then you clean. This one I have, so you can see here's a little decoration. So that would be marked in the register. So here is Anna from Australia, born in Mexico, lived in Texas, now an Australian, cleaning some pot. She's at the very end of the process. Yeah.
You just clean with a brush.
We just clean with a brush. And then you wrap it up in the tissue paper and you make sure you do it exactly the way the boss lady told you. Okay. And you put it into the bag. Except she does what you're absolutely not supposed to do, which is blew into the bag. Because before you put it into the bag, what you have to do is you have to turn it inside out, punch holes in it in the bottom, and make sure it's completely dry before you put the pot back into it. So you don't want to put your breath back into the bag. But
She loves you have this. We're doing it the wrong way.
yeah. I don't mention it to most people. This is this is what I worked with mostly, which is burnt bone from the context 4859, which was a big, huge midden pile that was over structure 27. And so I would get it in this context tray, right? Every tray, the general finds just go into a tray that's got the information on it. I would lay it out to dry. Every time that a new context came in, you had to put it in this little, you had to write a little card for it so that, because things did not come in all at once, right? And so you didn't want to be making new things when you already had stuff from that context. So you would have to, go through, look, oh, we already have this context. Oh, we don't have this context. Let me make a little card. Everything then gets kind of jumped in together to dry, and then eventually cleaned and stored. This was my favorite thing to do, was to clean burnt bone. And you can see this is a huge bag, all from the same context. And then I convinced Nick's daughter, Megan, that her main job was putting the numbers on the small finds bags. And I said, come out here and clean burnt bone with me. And she was, after about 15 minutes, she's like, this is the best. And I'm like, you got it, man. Because we just sit out here and we just clean and clean and clean and clean. Yeah. Other things that I got to clean this is a hand axe, obviously, or could have had a thing on it. This is a huge piece of pot that they found in 2017. It's hard to make out from this picture. It's in a big tray. This is, they literally had to bring the stone with it. But this is what it would have looked like, one of these grooved ware pots. That's literally just out of the trench. So it's still wet. Now, the great thing about the Ness, all this Neolithic art, look at this. Look at this. Does that look familiar? Yeah, it's the eyebrows. Okay. So, we know from, you can see here, that they used color on the walls in the Ness, okay? It's amazing. There is a common motif that shows up again and again on the stones in the Ness, the butterfly, the Brodgar butterfly. And that's that right there. We find different kinds of things. Like here we have these little teeny cut marks with, in lines. My first year there, I got the task with the other Jan to inventory all of the Neolithic art in the big shed. And this shed, you can't tell from this picture, was just, every wall was just covered with pieces of stone that had art of some kind on it. So what different kinds? Peck stone, incised stone. Here's another, the chevrons, they like the chevrons. Here's another butterfly. And that's the same stone, actually. This is a pretty good example. There's another one. This one I had to enhance a little bit to really see it. But, that's just some of the cool stuff that they find there. Now, this year, I got to excavate in Trench J. This is my friend Paul, who we share puzzling and cats. And he's the supervisor in Trench J, and I asked him if I could be on his team, and he said yes. So Trench J. So remember I said there was a boundary wall? Okay. Trench J includes the northern boundary wall. They like to call it the Great Wall of Brodgar. And you can see it just kind of peters off here at this end. So this is structure 5, okay? Now the original structure 5 came like this, all right? This is a later extension, this part right here. Structure 5 also extends about another 3 or 4 meters under the ground. So it's huge, right? What's cool about structure 5 is, see in the yellow here, these are post holes. Now these are not post holes from a building that was there before. These are structural post holes that they believe were actually used to hold up the roof. And here they believe that the roof was turf rather than stone, because this building is the oldest. This one is built on the glacial till. There's probably not highly unlikely that there's anything else underneath it, but you never know with the Ness. It has furniture as well. This was the primary entrance. Eventually, when they added the extension, there was an entrance right in here. And then something happened with structure 5 and they closed off the main part. They put in this secondary entrance and they continued to use this area. There was actually here, they built another wall and they have what we call structure 32, which used the other end of structure 5, but that didn't last very long. Now you'll notice here, see, this is the wall, this is the inner part of the wall, this is the outer part of the wall, there's the midden in between. There's a drain that actually runs the length of this. Again, they were good with drains. Now this hearth, this is the one I helped excavate. This hearth is actually put there after the building was decommissioned and filled in. So they continued to use the area, but they didn't build any more buildings above it. Unlike in the other parts where if they decommissioned a building, they would just build a new one on top of it. So there's something different about this structure. This is a nice little video, if I can get it to work. That's the Great Wall. Okay, here we are working. You can see Sarah with her planning frame, which I'll talk about in a second. The little red flags were where the bees lived. I'll tell you more about those later if you want to know about them. This is the main entrance right there. And this is my corner. This is Claire, who's an archaeologist from California, and this is Katrina, who's just a volunteer from England, I think she's from. And that's our corner. And you see these little red things or white things? These are the things that are found in the small finds bag. So when you find something, you mark where you find it, and it has the small finds number on it. And eventually somebody's going to come along with this big old GPS thing, and they're going to mark the GPS point. Then you can pull it up. Other than that, it's got to stay there. Nope, I don't want to see that again. So here's the hearth that we excavated. Here's some of the first thing we did was we did environmental samples of the soil in the hearth. And so that all had to be recorded. I didn't do that. The real archaeologist did that. You also have to record the context, the layers, the fills, that kind of thing. Everything you have to take pictures of everything, which is a lot easier than I thought it would be. So there's this process that involves not only excavating, right, but filling out all these forms, right? This is what the hearth looks like after we excavated it. And the reason they wanted to do this is they wanted to see what was underneath. What was underneath, here's the wall, okay? Here's furniture, right? And here's a post hole. It's right by one of the post holes. You can see the post hole here. Okay. I've in the PowerPoint, and I will share this with anybody who wants it. I have these links they have 3D models of everything. Okay, not just like this, but the kind that you can use online. Here's just showing the planning process. Again, that's Sarah getting ready to do some planning. That's not her plan right there. But even though we take pictures of everything and everything's done digitally, right? And they make these big, cool 3D models, you still have to draw the plan, by hand. Things we found on the right that's Claire holding a piece of flint that I found, which I was really excited about. And then right after that, she found the worked flint, which was even better. This was my favorite thing. This was a big, huge piece of pot, or to me, that I found. This is it in the ground. This is it after we pulled it out. Again, here you can see the little plastic thing that's got the find number on it, tells you what it is. And as you can see, I'm pretty excited. This became my corner. I think that that Paul just wanted to give me busy work. because he didn't want me to have to do the kind of mind-numbing stuff that the others were doing, because they're excavating the floors, and it's a very slow, difficult process. So he said, "Here, excavate this." And I'm like, "Well, why should I excavate that?" And he says, "Well, I think there might be a like an entry there. This might be an entrance." And I looked at him and I said, "But that's right next to the furniture. Why would they have an entrance next to the furniture?" And he kind of goes, "Good point." Anyway, I found some charcoal, I found some pot, I found some teeth. I don't know what kind of teeth, sheep, goat, cattle. And now the cattle teeth are huge, actually. I think those are more likely to be that. That one really good day, as you can see. Because what you do is you save everything. See, the general finds just get thrown into the tray. The small finds go into the bags. The charcoal has to go immediately to the finds hut, because it is, it's going to fall apart. And so you just keep that, you turn it in at the end of the day, and they will like kill you if you don't return the Sharpie. So this was my last day. Paul just had me cleaning up, because I'd basically removed the stones, found a few little things, and was down to what they call shillet, which is basically every time you scrape it, there's just a bunch of little rocks that appear. So later they actually came into this spot and did some environmental sampling to see what was in the soil. Okay, other things they found. Last year they found steps on the Great Wall. First steps ever found in Great Britain, the oldest. And these are my travel companions, the Queen and Berserker from the Lewis Chessman. And the really cool thing they found this year was they extended the trench around the Great Wall, and they got down and they found these stones. Now this is looking directly down on these stones, and you can see that they're sticking out of the ground sideways, right? Not this way, this way. So they used to, the tours that would be right above my head most of the time I was working, they would say, "Oh, we think the walls was maybe 2 meters high. It wasn't a defensive wall or anything like that." And then they found this, and they said, "You know what? This is either from stone robbing or just the decommissioning of the wall. They were pushing these things off of the wall, and they fell so hard that they stuck into the ground. That means the wall had to be a lot taller than we think it was. It wouldn't have, they would have just slid off, right? If it was just 2 meters, had to be higher." So that's an interesting find. And then after I left, one of the few, they found little teeny bits of wood, right? Just little teeny bits of wood. This time in structure 27, they found a plank of wood, and they are very, very excited about that, because they can figure out what tree it came from, whether it grew there, all kinds of things. Okay, I've got some links on here where you can find out a lot more about it. I brought this, if you guys want to, pass these around. This is a hand axe that my supervisor made for me. You want to check that out? Don't cut yourself. It is actually sharp. We got the stone ball, This is the third version of the guidebook, because they've been digging since 2003. Next year is the last year. They're going to stop because, one, they're running out of money, and two, it's just they've gotten down to the bottom of this layer, so they're just going to wait and let somebody else come along later and do the others. If you ever want to see what a field manual looks like, got one right here. Okay?
Is that the one you put together?
No, this is just the one. This is their field manual. I just put together like a little 3 or 4 pager for the finds hut. Yeah.
So we have about 10 more minutes. You do have a question in the chat.
Okay.
So Chris says, "Great presentation. Any theories offered on what the Vikings may have removed when they broke in?"
No, they don't know. They don't know whether there were bone in there. Was bone in there or not? They actually broke in because there was a bad storm and they were looking for shelter. Yeah, they don't know. They don't know whether there was anything in there or not, because some of the cairns have lots and lots and lots of bones. Some of the cairns have hardly any bones. Some of them are articulated, some of them aren't articulated. There's evidence that they would move them from one cairn to another, right? It's a very complicated situation.
Well, that's one of my questions about the burials. Maybe you said that before. Why the double walls, Kate?
It's cold there in the winter, and the
So it
wind,
is insulation.
the wind blows a lot. Yeah, that's what they kind of think. Yeah, is that it's just keeps you warmer. Yeah, yeah.
Then follow up with the need for rebuilding. I'm confused at because they're stacked very well. And
Yeah.
if you're filling it with midden, that's a very
Well,
well-built structure.
Okay, they would only fill them with midden when they were totally finished with
Right.
them.
Oh, the
yeah.
interior of the walls didn't have any.
Yeah, they did.
Oh, yeah.
No,
Okay. You're
no.
talking about the
When they
structures.
decommissioned the structure, would no longer use them, not going to build on them anymore, then they would fill them up with midden and cover
But
them.
why decommission them?
I think because the styles would run out, for example, there'd be a different, they had moved on.
Okay.
So the structure 10, which is looks more like structure 8, right, from Barnhouse, is totally different, right, from all the others. So there's been a change in style. Something's been changing societally. And then there's something, and then actually that's the end of the Neolithic, moving into the Bronze Age. So that's their Neolithic stuff. It's a new world now. We're gonna,
Here in the Southeast, they talk about it like, and you understand they're not using stone.
right.
So wood rots at an incredible rate. And then, just natural infestation with pests that you'd have to rebuild in a certain period.
Right.
But these would be very different rules because of the construction methods. Of
Yeah.
being so
Yeah,
slow.
I mean, yeah, because they would use these settlements, these houses for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
But styles would change. So you can actually, like, some of the lower levels, instead of orthostats, the walls had little like points, right? To
Yeah.
have internal divisions. Then they start using the orthostats, then they start using the piers.
Yeah. That's interesting. I love seeing the posts that you was in the structure.
So Lonnie asks, has the project done any underwater archaeology along the shoreline? He says, I would think there might be other residential structures near the main building.
I think they've done some like geophysical stuff, but nobody's actually gotten underneath there. And so the Loch of Harry to the east would have been marshland back then. It wouldn't even have been a loch at that point, but it would have been very marshy and not a place to build. But in Orkney, the sea levels rose significantly between the Mesolithic and the Neolithic. So the Mesolithic stuff is what's underwater. The Neolithic stuff is above water. Yeah.
And then Elizabeth has a question as well about the post holes that were found. She says she has a question about the post holes, which suggest the presence of wooden structures. Was that just at the one site, or do they think that there were post holes elsewhere as well? She asks because of an interest in environmental history and what it might tell us about the extent of wooded areas and dynamics of deforestation on the islands.
Yeah. So they're just now, I mean, for a long time, the idea was that Orkney has always been mostly treeless. And if they had wood, it was wood that like floated over from Canada or something. And that's why they were building in stone. And now the evidence is we're seeing the post holes, and they're realizing, and there's other evidence like their people have dug down into the peat and they're finding logs, So they're now starting to figure out that Orkney used to have trees, that it used to be much more wooded, but as they used up the trees because of the wind and the storms, only small trees would grow back, and only then in very low-lying areas. And so they deforested it basically. So yeah, I was talking with my supervisor on, and I was saying something about, what would make somebody just decide, I'm gonna go see what's on the other side of this hill. And he said, it would have been, and then even in the Neolithic, it would have been more difficult than that because it would have been covered in trees. It's not just you see this big hill, I'm gonna go see what's on the other side. It's like, you got to get through the forest. But they're just now finding the evidence because, as he says, that stuff doesn't get preserved. It's not preserved well. So that's what you get the holes. So finding that plank was just amazing. Yeah. I hope that answered the question.
Are they burning animal dung for fuel then, if it's not wood? If wood's an issue in the Olympics?
Probably, and peat, they still burn peat on
Yeah.
Lewis. Um, you know, there would have been small trees at
Sure.
least, you know, so, and I think that's why you build your houses so thick, right? So you don't have to have a big fire.
I kind of a related question. So you mentioned that they were obviously agriculturalists, so they were farming and they were presumably eating animals that they.
Yeah, they had a lot of cattle and,
yeah, so they were
and
growing animals too. But they live so close to the water, they were probably using a lot of water resources as well, aquatic animals and fish.
yeah, they think maybe those little things in Scarborough, the watertight things were where they would maybe keep bait or, you know, things that they had caught. There's actually a guy who wrote an article, I remember, I hope I remember this right, that even on some of the northern islands, they found evidence that they think they might have even been doing deep sea fishing. But in the UK, there's a certain point in the Neolithic when aquatic animals kind of become taboo.
That's interesting. I wonder why. So the reason I say that's related to the wood question is because in other societies where they don't have access to wood for fuel, they'll use fermentation as a means to preserve and process food. So I was wondering if they have evidence of fermentation in this population.
I don't know that.
Particularly aquatic resources.
I don't know the answer to that. Yeah.
Do they have fish weirs? So much stone, like they're building out like coastal ways of catching them?
I haven't read about any of those. Yeah. And they don't have any rivers, right? They have little burns, yeah, as they call them. I know people have to go to class.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have just a couple more minutes here if others have questions or.
When you go back?
When am I going back?
Yeah, when you go back?
Next year. I already got
You can
reservations.
excavate again,
Did
Um,
you say what got you there in the first place? Sorry.
Well, I wanted to go see Scarborough,
Uh-huh.
and Jan and I had gone to the UK, and she wanted to go to Edinburgh. And I said, well, if we're going all the way to Edinburgh, then we're going all the way to Scarborough.
Sure.
And I really didn't even know all the other stuff that was there, you know? I just wanted to see Scarborough. And I knew about the Ness because I'd seen a National Geographic about it in 2014. But I didn't know about all the other stuff, you know? And yeah, I just fell in love with it.
Yeah, it's hard not to.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, there's a,
You might have done this before I got to come in, but how do people make their living in this area?
they were farmers. Yeah, they were farmers. So, this is actually, I know this is a little video, it'll stop in a second. This is one of my favorite places, and I've commissioned one of the local artists to turn this into a painting for me.
When did you start the program for archaeology there?
2018, I think.
What made you want to
2019.
to grad school?
I just wanted to study about, when I came back from our trip, okay, I just started, you know, getting online and looking and finding every book that I could find on Orkney. And so I read Colin Richards' huge book on the settlements. And, you know, any book I could find on Orkney, I bought and read. And then I discovered that they had that online program. And now it's really expensive if you're an international student, but I had the money. So I was like, you know, when I asked the stockbroker about it, she's like, well, I'm not going to deny anybody further education. So, you know, spend what you want. So I just, yeah, it was all online. They still do it. And I mean, it's not that expensive. Like it's not like $10,000 a semester. It's like $10,000 until you get the degree, which is nice. And it, you know, it's all done like live. But if you can't attend because, for example, one of my art and archaeology class was at 3 o'clock in the morning, my time, you know? So, but you can watch the recordings. I mean, they have fabulous archaeologists, who do the teaching, like Colin Richards. He's real big, not just in Orkney, but elsewhere. You know, he basically retired from one place and just went to Orkney to teach. So I actually had him as one of my professors. And yeah, it was just, it was fun. Plus, because, there were other Americans in the course, there were, Brits in the course. If you want to do the actual, mine is a master's of letters, so I didn't have to do any of the field school or anything like that. But, if you want to do that and take those other classes, you just have to be able to get yourself over there, because the field school is only a couple of weeks. And the other classes that require stuff, you may have to go for like a week or two, but then you can do the rest from home.
All right, well, we are at time, so
Okay.
I want to thank Dr. Green again for giving this awesome presentation on her work in Orkney. And if people